Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome Don Arnold.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you today? I've been asked to describe 20 years in 7 minutes, so we better get to it. When I was asked to do a retrospective on 20 years of the Executive Leadership Conference, I thought about how the conference had changed from the scant attendance we had in Charlottesville 20 years ago to the overflow in Richmond when we didn't have enough seats for everyone at dinner. Snowy golf in Hershey, PA, and then flying embers here in Williamsburg in the years gone by. The ELC has evolved in audience, in scope, in venue, and in focus. It's an event that certainly meets this year's theme of delivering transformation. So in preparing the book, 20 Years of Partnership, which you can get out front today, I had the opportunity to look back over 20 years of programs, 20 years of themes, 20 years of speakers, and thousands of photos of ELC in action, from black and white to high-res digital video. But rather than talk about what's changed, I look to where ELC has held the course. What's been the same? What has not changed over 20 years? And I found some surprising constants. It's engaging topics, intense discussions, a sense of creating and sustaining a community, and some really great speakers over the years. What kept bringing us back to this event? Well, in the beginning in Charlottesville, I think it was a sense of wonder that we were doing something pretty special in collaborating with our adversaries. Adversaries was a term that Frank Guglielmo used to describe the relationship between government and industry at the Management of Change Conference in 1990, which was the year before that first ELC. At the Executive Leadership Conference, we explored a new relationship. We were partners. We found commonality, we found more community, and we found more constancy in our objectives than we thought existed between government and industry. As the conference grew and as it matured, we continued to find reasons to come back together again. That sense of community has become a binding factor in this conference. Partnership was something that was evident as we assembled programs and workshops and we set up seminars and we debated some troublesome issues. By the time the conference reached the Richmond Marriott, we were in a whirlwind, by federal standards at least, of change. The overturn of the Brooks Act, the FARA, FASA, ITEMRA, and the rise of the chief information officers. Just over 3 or 4 years we had all these changes. One of the things we see is that the CIO Council and the Executive Leadership Conference are pretty tightly wrapped together. If you look at the names that intersect from the Council and from the ELC in the 90s, the original CIO Mafia, names that keep popping up are Jim Fleisig, Woody Hall, Harold Gracie, Bill Piatt, Ira Hobbs, Karen Evans, and many of these people obviously are here today. Al Balutis, Dave Borland, Roger Baker, who keeps coming back, John Gilligan, Lee Holcomb, and my friend Marty Wagner, who's not here with us today. But in Richmond, ELC came into its own as a major forum. One of the things that we talked about in Richmond, and a lot of folks will remember this, was the IRS tax reform operation, where from GAO, Rona Stillman talked about how badly IRS was doing, and Hank Philcox, who had just left as the CIO of IRS, talked about how poorly GAO had reported on his agency. It was actually a lively discussion from the floor to the podium. There was a great deal of fireworks with it. Another memorable event was in 1997 when one of our most esteemed speakers, Congressman Steve Horn, took the podium for brief remarks before dinner one night because he had to get back to D.C. He insisted he could only join us for 15 or 20 minutes. Well, Congressman Horn waxed eloquent for about an hour about his days as a college professor, his political triumphs in D.C. and in California. There were several hundred ELC folks sitting in the audience with nothing on their tables after a long, long day except wine. There were several bottles of wine, and after that hour and a quarter was up, Horn may not have noticed that the audience was restless and hungry, but Bob Woods, who was hosting him, certainly did, and the audience was vociferous. It might have been later that very same evening that Dave Borland and Nancy Peters set off the hotel's fire alarms in the Richmond Marriott by blowing cigar smoke outside of the open bar at the hospitality suite. In later years, we did learn to cover the smoke detectors, and eventually we moved the cigars outside. You may have seen that last night. But ELC was founded in substance, and there was substance around all these topics of acquisition reform, outsourcing, GWACs, BPR, NPR, a whole plethora of the catchwords and phrases and acronyms of our business: service to the citizen, electronic commerce, heat management, enterprise licensing. It goes on. We were pretty well covering all these emerging topics while we were building new relationships that made it easier to talk about these issues that confronted us in our procurement, in technology, in standards, and in policy. Well, from Richmond, as more and more people know, we moved to Hershey, where our first conference was held just about a month after September the 11th in 2001. We had serious concerns. We weren't sure whether we should even hold a conference in those sad days after that event. Would we be targets bringing together hundreds of government IT specialists in one place? In retrospect, it may sound a little pretentious or a little paranoid to think that this community could be powerful in a world sense if it were eliminated, but we thought about that. We thought about it from the planning committee and the executive committee. We decided to go forward with the conference, and we're glad that we did. In Hershey, because of those events, the focus of the conference shifted. We weren't talking just about security and about infrastructure protection. We were talking about becoming more of a community. We were a nation at war, and that made a difference. We began operating more like partners. A year later, in 2002, we were addressed by the Solicitor General of the U.S., Ted Olson, whose wife was a passenger on American Airlines Flight 77, which rammed into the Pentagon. So lots of things went on there as we went down those days. When the ELC moved to Williamsburg here in 2006, it continued to evolve. One of the substantive changes I think that we noted was a greater emphasis on the political part of our world. In 2006, we had Mary Madeline and James Carville debating the upcoming midterm elections that had quite an impact on our government. And one thing that ELC means to me and to a lot of the people here lies in the fact that people have been a part of it since it began. If we have giants in this little business, this niche called government information technology, certainly their names are linked to the Executive Leadership Conference. Emmett Page, Roger Johnson, Steve Kellman, Marty Wagner. There's one name that is ultimately synonymous with the Executive Leadership Conference. When IAC was first formed, it was actually more committee than council, and it needed focus. All that ELC has been and all that it has become is due to the vision of one man who said, we need a purpose, so let's hold an event. And that made the Executive Leadership Conference happen. Izzy Feldman is here with us today. We thank him. He certainly has vision. Okay. Today, the ELC is bigger, it's bolder, it's brashier. We don't have overheads, we have fancy lights and teleprompters than it was 20 years ago. But then the world is different, and so are each of us, and the work that we do is different. I'm excited for some of the things that we're doing, and I'm excited about what the next 20 ELCs will look like. I hope to see you there. And let me say that there are a number of people, a short number of people, who have been to all 20 ELCs. If they're here, raise your hand or stand up. That would be Jim Obendorfer, Ray Kane, Howard Adey, and Bob Woods, along with myself, 5 people who've been to 20 of them. Thank you very much. In putting this together and in putting together the 20 years of partnership retrospective book, a question that I've been asked, as somebody said I should relay here, is what was the hardest part? A lot of people say the hardest part of doing this was it slogging through thousands of pictures and scanning them. And actually the hardest part was finding enough pictures to fill a book that didn't have Bob Woods in them. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome the ELC co-chair, Dave McClure.
Thanks. Each year, IAC recognizes excellence in government IT through the annual Excellence.gov Awards program. Since its inception in 2002, over 150 programs have been recognized. The 20 finalists are honored at a lunch in Washington, D.C., at which the winners are announced. In addition to being recognized at lunch, each of the finalists and winners receives an invitation to display their winning project at the 2011 Management of Change Conference. A complimentary registration to MOC goes along with that invitation. This year, we're excited to announce that we've expanded and improved the program. First, we have combined excellence.gov with the annual Intergovernmental Solutions Awards program. Second, we're looking for outstanding programs in 6 categories, ranging from enhancing the customer experience to going green. Third, the winners will also receive a complimentary government registration to the 2011 ELC. And finally, we have a special category for the best government mobile app. The nomination process opens today, and more information is available at the ACT-IAC booth. The deadline is December the 10th, so start your nominations. Now, on to our luncheon keynote speaker, Richard Spires, Chief Information Officer from the Department of Homeland Security. Richard's credentials as CIO and IT executive span both industry and government. He spent 16 years at SRA International in a number of technical and managerial roles. He also was the president and chief operating officer of Mantis Incorporated for 3 years before entering government. In 2004, Richard served as the Deputy Commissioner for Operations Support and later the CIO at the IRS. He was appointed as the DHS CIO in 2009 and is responsible for the department's $5.4 billion investment in information technology. He brings impressive knowledge and genuine expertise to the CIO Council, something which Vivek Kundra and I have taken regular advantage of. We turn to Richard to co-lead with Mike Duffy the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative. He's doing a spectacular job reinvigorating the CIO Council Best Practices Committee and leading the federal CIO community's analysis and recommendations for IT management reforms called for by OMB. Today, Richard is going to share some insights into the challenges of using enterprise governance to drive not only his IT agenda, but transformation at DHS. I think we're in for an insightful talk from a well-respected colleague. Please join me in welcoming Richard Spires.
That wonderful introduction, and I'd like to thank Kathy as well and the whole planning committee. What a wonderful conference, right? I mean, it's just well planned and great topics. You know, I want to say that I'm very honored to have been asked to do this. I mean, I view this community, you're my peers, you're my colleagues, and I'm hoping that here in the next 40 minutes or so I can impart some of the experience that I've had, some of, I think, knowledge that I've gained that might be useful to some of you, both in government and in industry, as we talk about some very important topics. I'd also want to say I'm very grateful. I've had a very successful career, in my view, in the private sector and in the public. And you know, I spent 4.5 years at the IRS and needed a break. But I got a call to come back in, and you know, when I thought a lot about it, but the CIO position, especially at major departments, I think can be beyond people. Obviously, everything starts with people, right? But the second most, I think, critical thing for true transformation is how you handle IT today, especially in large government agencies, such as the Department of Homeland Security. So I feel very grateful to be in a position to help drive real change in government. And maybe I just won't say no, but when I got that call about helping with the data center consolidation initiative at the federal level with best practices, it was just kind of natural to say, you know, it's beyond my day job, but it's important. And when I was at the IRS, particularly on the best practices side, I always said, you know, we could do this better as a government, right? And so when I got asked to do that, I said, this is something I really should take on. I really should take on. So the theme of this conference, right, delivering transformation. So I just said the CIO position or IT can be as transformational as anything that you see in government except the people themselves, right? And I really mean that. The other part of it, delivery or delivering, you know, it was John Chambers last week, for some of you that heard him speak, he was here in town, talked so much about, what did he say, operational excellence is key. Much more important than innovation was his thing. Shelley Metzenbaum, who's I think in the audience, she was speaking earlier today, she talked about measurement to help us deliver government better, execute better, right? I'm huge on how do we improve execution, all right? How do we deliver on that transformation? And I would submit that we can come up with how we want to transfer or what we want to transform, but executing that has been largely our problem, right? Largely our problem. So to kind of set this context, and my hope here, and I've got my alarm clock right here, I hope to take about the next 20, 25 minutes or so with some remarks and leave maybe about 10 minutes or so for some Q&A or comments back to me on those remarks. So I will keep us on time. We will finish at 1:30. But to set this up, maybe the way to do that is, let me set a little context about what we're trying to achieve at DHS and what I'm personally trying to do there, okay, with my team. And I think that will then help spark a discussion, or I'll then relate that, because I believe the challenges that I see at DHS were not dissimilar from what I saw at IRS, maybe a little different scale, right? But when I talk to my colleagues, other CIOs or other senior government officials, I hear a lot of the similarities. So I think we can use DHS as kind of a model, maybe not the best model, but a model to look at how we can do some transformation here across the federal government. So I've come on board, and I've been on board 14 months now in my job, Department of Homeland Security. I've beat the average, by the way, as far as tenure for the CIO in the Department of Homeland Security. A win. I got a win. I'm trying to achieve three things. Easy to say, not necessarily so easy to do. The first is rationalize the infrastructure at the Department of Homeland Security. I think most of you know in this audience, we've embarked our own data center consolidation initiative. We have our own OneNet, where we're bringing together our physical network infrastructure. We're doing some things from a security perspective at the enterprise level. We're rationalizing our Active Directory. We're doing a lot of good stuff under the covers, and I think it is really good stuff. I'm not going to talk about that today. Okay, we're going to set that aside. But it's very important work that's ongoing. The second thing is we just don't run programs very well at the Department of Homeland Security. Not saying that we don't have some excellently run programs. We have some pockets. But I've done 82 program reviews, essentially analogous to tech stats, usually 2 hours in length. Some programs we came back to the well a few times. A couple programs had it for about 8 hours. Okay? So this is not just cursory review. This is real in-depth review of these programs. And we have systemic weaknesses on how we run programs. Okay? We don't have good best practices across the board, good standards. Our enterprise lifecycle is relatively weak, immature. Okay? Things to work on, right? And I'm a big believer in, as a CIO at this level, I should be working to systemically fix these. I mean, we can have wins by helping one program X, Y, Z, but I want to make sure, hopefully, that we can leave the place better and that we can know how to execute better. It was alluded to by Dave. There's a lot of work, and in fact, ACT-IAC today, I just told, published your recommendations to OMB on what you think should be done from an industry's perspective on how to improve how we run IT programs in the federal government. Good stuff. Myself, together with a working group I put together, have done similar things, all right? We have submitted that stuff. We actually had an excellent, was it about 2 weeks ago, we had a special CIO council meeting. It was an excellent 2-hour presentation, discussion, and I'm very heartened by those discussions. I think we're headed in the right way, okay? That being said, as Alan Balutis, who has been part of this team that I'm working with, said, you know, we talked about all this stuff 10 years ago, right? So what's different? What's going to be different now that wasn't there then, okay? And I guess that leads me as kind of a segue into the third thing that I hope to accomplish why I'm here at DHS. And you need to bear with me here a little bit, because hopefully if I do this right, it'll all come together. Enterprise governance, okay? And I want to define that a little bit. It's easy to say, again, but you got to define what do you really mean by that? And what I really mean by enterprise governance is I want to make sure that every dollar we invest in IT, okay, is used in the best way to support the mission of DHS in my case, or the business functions of DHS if it's supporting the business side, right? I want to make sure that we have whatever we need in place to make sure that happens, okay? That we've got good decision-making mechanisms in place, that we know how to spend that next dollar effectively. And I would submit to you today that we are relatively weak in DHS in that right now. We're working on it. I would submit to you that at least other agencies I've talked to would admit that they're relatively weak or not as strong as they should be. And by the way, I say, what's the next dollar invested in IT? You can easily extend that with enterprise governance to what's the next dollar of resource you should be spending, how should you be spending it. Could be IT, it could be something else. Could be in people, it could be in process, it could be something else, right? So what's the issue with Department of Homeland Security? Well, probably not too surprised. We bring together, I mean, different numbers, but certainly you have the large, like 8 organizations that pre-existed, and, you know, FEMA and Customs and Border, well, actually reorganized some things. There was a Customs Service, and there was INS, and things got reorganized a bit. But we brought all these organizations together. We also created some smaller organizations as part of the headquarters. So we've got 22, if you will, components, as we call them, maybe analogous to bureaus and some other organizations, other departments. We got 22 of these things. So we're very, very organizationally stovepiped, right? And we're about 8 years old, but we haven't been able to break down those stovepipes. And by the way, I want to be careful here. I don't want people to walk away thinking that Richard Spires believes that we should reorganize the Department of Homeland Security. I do not think we should, okay? There are very good reasons we're organized the way we are. Very, very strong cultures that need to exist and have grown up and have evolved in such a way to really, if you will, optimize what that organization does. Secret Service, Border Patrol, CIS, ICE. They have very strong cultures, and they're different cultures, okay? Very positive for those organizations. We need to keep those cultures, but we need to integrate. Otherwise, why have the Department of Homeland Security, right? What's the point? To get synergy. And so how do we get better synergy, all right? What's the problem? Well, the problem is we tend to build things, okay, and optimize things within each of those stovepipes organizationally right now. Great example, the best example that I see. The things called common operating pictures, or COPs. Okay, these are systems, you bring a bunch of data together, we all walk into big rooms, and you can see on big screens, you can see situational awareness, whether it be a disaster in FEMA, whether it be at our National Operations Center, which handles all kinds of things, whether it be at the AMOC out in California. There's all these different COPs. Well, guess what? They've all been built separately. Very, very little integration, very, very little standardization across those. Probably not the best way to spend your next IT dollar, right? And that's where I believe that governance, effective governance, comes in. Because I just have found, my experience, 2 agencies, IRS and DHS, that even if you have an effective enterprise architecture, even if you have an effective capital planning and investment control process, CPIC process, okay? Even if you have, not that it's not important, even if you have good outcome-based measures, okay? We're talking about a level of complexity here that's pretty staggering at times, right? So we've got a bunch of stakeholders, right? I mean, Mr. Tapscott talked last night about government and that, right, the old model, command and control. We're not really command and control, are we? Not really. I mean, think about if you're running a major program, not only do you have to worry about the business owners that you're going to deliver that program to, right? But you've got to worry about your IG, GAO, OMB, the Hill. You got all these other stakeholders that you have to satisfy. And God forbid if you don't, what can happen to your program, right? These are all issues that you have to deal with. And what I have found is all those processes can really help you, but where's the integrating function? And that's where governance comes in, all right? And I'm not trying to be prescriptive about what it looks like as far as what that body looks like, who's on it and the like, but I think there's some real key principles about governance I've learned that I can point to real successes. I can point to successes first in the private sector, at IRS, and I can even point to a success I'll talk about in a minute at DHS, all right? So what am I really talking about? I'm talking about grouping things together in portfolios, all right? So you can have individuals come together and develop shared outcomes. Measures are a big part of it, okay? Not only measures, but shared outcomes, okay? Where do it's all the classic enterprise architecture, right? Where do I want to be? Let's take an example from DHS. Big screening portfolio. We screen people at the border as they come into the country, right? TSA screens people, ICE screens people. We have a whole bunch of reasons why we need to screen people and different components that do that, right? So that's a good example. Probably 50-some IT systems that support screening alone. 50-some that support screening, okay? That's a portfolio of functionality, right, that needs to be, if you will, governed. Okay, and it crosses all these components. Some of the systems are owned by CBP, some of them are owned by ICE, some by CIS. All that needs to come together, and that's what we're not doing effectively right now. So shared outcomes. So where do we want to be in screening in 5 years? Where are we now? What's that gap, right? Classic as-is to to-be kind of enterprise architecture work. But the important point is that these individuals, business leaders or mission leaders from all of these components, IT executives, probably finance people, privacy people, others, who are the stakeholders at senior levels that can make decisions coming together in a way in order to develop those shared outcomes and then have ownership in that. And that's the key. And when it works, and I've seen it work, it can work very well. What do we do today, though, right? I do a review, and I say, CBP, TSA has built something they think is really good. I really need you to take a look at that and see if you can use it. Do you think there's any way that CBP is going to use that? That's not going to happen, right? We all know that's not going to happen. But if I go in and I build a community, and these guys are meeting on a regular basis, okay, and they're developing shared outcomes, and they're looking at, okay, you know, we've got real dollar constraints. How are we going to move this ball forward so we all benefit? All right? People's behavior starts to change. It won't happen instantly, okay? It will not happen instantly. But over a year, over 2 years, I've seen fundamental change. I saw individuals at the IRS that were actually kind of at war at each other a year later, okay, developing systems together, okay? Speccing systems that would be developed to meet both their needs, all right? Now, it goes back, I mean, you know, I thought it was very interesting in Don Tapscott's speech last night, right? He kept coming back to a theme that had nothing to do with technology, right? It had to do with collaboration and trust. And that's, I think, what really needs to be done here to drive and deliver transformation. You have to build an environment of true collaboration, and you only do that by building true trust. And you only build trust by actually getting people together in that kind of environment. One other point about this I think is really key. To build that, you need a way so that everybody kind of gets on the same page with the same information. So many times I've seen that people are at war with each other or they disagree with each other, particularly in this kind of world. We're not talking about the political world where I'm a right and you're a leftist and we can never agree no matter what the facts are, right? I'm talking about truly us all wanting to improve the delivery of government in areas like border security that I don't think anybody's going to argue with, right? So if you can get the facts on the table, the transparency issue, if you can get the facts out on the table and everybody over time works with those facts, okay, I have found much, much better alignment over time. People will come together and they'll be able to agree. And if they get to know each other and they start to understand each other's, if you will, issues, like in screening, if CBP starts to understand TSA's issues in screening, right, they can come together in a way that's very powerful and even compromise with each other for the greater good. And that's what I mean by trust. And if you're the leader trying to pull this together, you have to be viewed, you have to really live this, that this is about making it better for government. This isn't about making it better for my organization, right? It has to be viewed as making it better for government. If you can create that environment and you're viewed that way, you can do very, very powerful things. At least that's been my experience. One quick example. Right now, in DHS, I walk in the door and within like 2 weeks, of course you're hit with 100 things, right? Fix this, fix that, you got to look at this, look at that. And one of the things they said you got to look at is all the IT for human resources, okay? Brought all these components together, hodgepodge of all these systems, nothing's working well together, we got real issues, all right? So it took a while, about 8 months, but about 4 months, 3-4 months ago, we stood up a governance board. We call it HRIT. It's got leadership from all the components out of their HR shop. It's got leadership from all the components out of the IT organizations, including headquarters. And we're meeting regularly. We've already done a full, first time ever, we've got a full inventory of all the HR systems now in the Department of Homeland Security. They're laying out right now where we want to be in 5 years. They're doing it in a very collaborative way. Early yet. I'm not going to claim real victory. But for those, I mean, I'd go to CIO council meetings, internal CIO council meetings for DHS, and I'd have the CIOs say, please, please do something to help fix this, right? They're not saying that anymore. They view this as a forum, as a way to be heard and to collaborate. As I say, I'm not going to claim real victory, but I want to give you an example. We're really trying to do this now, Department of Homeland Security. Okay, we're really setting up, we've got pilots going on these kinds of governance boards. We've already taken our enterprise architecture, we've broken it into 10 segments, 10 functions. We're looking to, like screening, like domain awareness, right, incident response, and we're really looking to set up these boards against these functions, okay? Got endorsement from the Deputy Secretary on the Hill to do this in the last month. We're moving out, all right? And I'm very, very excited about this because this, I think, over time, helps deliver that transformation, okay, that I think is so, so important. Another point about governance that I want to make, because I think it's also critical, and it ties more to industry, something that maybe you could more relate to. I think there's governance at that kind of enterprise portfolio level I talked about, so 50 programs and a screening portfolio, right? There's also governance at a program level, and I think programs can fail for a lot of reasons, IT programs, right? And we can talk about those. But I think one of the reasons that programs fail is because many times they have too many masters, okay? And what I, again, believe in is setting up governance over large programs so that a program manager knows they go to one body. They go to one body, that's where they get their decisions, that's where they get their direction. And on that body, just like we talked about the portfolio level having all the stakeholders, on that body you've got the business owner, you've got an IT executive over that area, you've got, you probably have the HR folks, a representative, CFO, again, things like privacy, It depends on what the system is, right? But it's the stakeholder community, and you drive decisions through that body. Again, transparent. Everybody sees that information. Everybody knows what's going on. The program manager has one place to go. I'm a big believer that if you're in a design and development today of an IT program, if that body isn't meeting at least once a month, maybe even more often, I don't think that body's doing its job. Okay? That's the kind of interaction I expect. That's, when I review these programs, those are the kinds of things I'm looking for when it comes to governance, when it comes to decision making. I mean, too many programs, they bemoan the fact, they said, hey, I can't stay on schedule, I can't get an answer. I can't make this call myself, and I can't get an answer. It takes me 4 weeks to get an answer, and I'm off schedule. It happens all the time in the Department of Homeland Security. So these are things, again, where active governance, the right people in the room, it doesn't happen instantly, but the amount of trust that will build up and ownership of that outcome. Again, I've seen major success stories by doing it that way, okay? The IRS, modernized e-file, big success story. I think it was that governance board over modernized e-file that was the real difference for that program over time. And I can point to others, okay? Active governance, and how does industry play a role in that, okay? And this is where it gets a little hard, because I expect industry, particularly those on the services integrator side who are like a prime contractor supporting the government on a major program, if you're seeing dysfunction in how we're making decisions and how we're interacting, I think you need to help point that out very respectfully, right, and in the right way. But we need that feedback, right? I think it's incumbent upon you. You're part of the partnership for success, right? And believe me, if we think you're screwing up, we're happy to tell you that, right? So I think it goes both ways. And I understand it's hard to tell your customers sometimes that. It really is hard. But sometimes it's incumbent, and now this is me. I mean, I've been on both sides, and I'll tell you what, I expect contractors to not always look at their own short-term self-interest, right? You know, I want contractors that are willing to say, that's wrong, we shouldn't do it that way, and maybe suffer some short-term consequences, because you're building a lot of respect on my side, right, by doing that. For those that really want to get it right, for those that want the government side to really improve. Delivering transformation. We need the outcome-based measures. We need a strong enterprise architecture. We need a strong capital planning investment control process to deliver the kinds of transformation in this government we need. We need just as much, okay, an environment where senior leaders can get together, build trust, build shared outcomes, drive to those, okay, under a strong governance model. I do not think we can deliver true transformation without that in any kind of repeatable model. And so I'm trying to drive that at the DHS level, and I'm trying to drive that at the federal government level. Thank you very much. We've got 10, a little over 10 minutes. Be happy to take some questions or comments from the floor at this time. Okay. Wait for the microphone. Yes, John.
Richard, a few months back, you talked with a group of us about your initiative to undertake a inside look and a kind of a thorough overhaul, if you will, of human capital in the IT ranks within the entire department. Can you give us an update on that?
Sure. I should first talk about what we're doing in my organization. It is a federated model in the Department of Homeland Security, so there are CIOs at many of the components with their own staff, and the CIO's dotted line report to myself. From the standpoint of looking at human capital, one thing I want to say to this audience, and I've said before, is I walk in the door and there's a little over 100 feds in my organization and about 1,000 contractors. I say, that ratio doesn't quite seem right to me. And it really was not. It wasn't that I have any problems with contractors. I was one, right? So I actually respect contractors a lot. But there are certain things, and especially in the kinds of work we do when it comes to oversight, when it comes to really trying to collaborate across organizational boundaries, that you really need federal government leadership to do. And so we've embarked, and and to her credit, Margie Graves, who's my deputy, they had been building a plan to rebalance that. And so one of the first things that I got to do was look at that plan when I arrived. And I generally agree with it. We've tweaked it a bit, and we're continuing to tweak it. But we've been rebalancing that workforce to try to get, I think, the right mix. We're at about 254 feds now on board in my organization. And we're going to continue to do that. We'll probably get around 350 to 400 feds in my organization, which we feel is about right with where we want to go. And again, it's not anything against the contractor community. We absolutely need the contractor, the industry, to support us. But I'm a big believer that the federal government needs to take ownership of its work. It needs to provide the oversight on large programs, for instance. I am not a big believer in outsourcing program management for large programs. We brought that stuff in-house at the IRS, I think, effectively, and we're looking to do more of that here throughout DHS. More specifically to the point about other components, each of the components is looking at their own workforce, and we're supporting that initiative. What should be their balance? Now, we do have an operational component in my organization. Many of them have very large operational components. So that might be a different balance percentage-wise between the federal government employee base and the contractor employee base, depending on exactly what they're doing day in and day out in those particular IT organizations. Other questions or comments? Pat.
Richard, thanks for your comments here today. I was intrigued by your comments around the governance, enterprise governance, and in particular you alluded to the fact that it's not hard to see a stretch to other parts of the enterprise adopting that kind of model. I was wondering, do you see hints of that, and where is that occurring in the department?
I'm not sure. You mean within the Department of Homeland Security or outside? Inside. Well, I mean, when I talk about enterprise governance, I mean the enterprise. So in this case, it's all of DHS, okay? So as an example, when we're looking at these 10 different functional areas to set up governance around, we would expect, and we're doing it, like let's take IT services, which is actually one of the 10. So the 10 are not necessarily all just mission-oriented. IT services is one of them. We have an IT services governance board. All the components are represented on that board, okay? And that's where we do the governance around things like the data center consolidation and the OneNet. And a lot of the things we're doing under the covers from an infrastructure level, we govern that through that board, okay? And it's chaired by my deputy along with the deputy CIO from CBP, but it has key representation from all the components. Does that get to your question, or? Oh, okay, outside of, well, what I was trying to say was, and we're already working this, let's take, domain awareness, okay? When we look at that 2B kind of 5-year capability view, where would you like to be in domain awareness? There might be things you're going to do to your IT systems to upgrade them or build new systems or replace old ones, but there very well could be things, or there are things well beyond. I mean, what's our strategy around drones into the future, right? Okay, or other aircraft, okay? What should they be? That, again, of course, is all a set of strategy questions, too, that should be done within the concept or context of this enterprise governance. So very quickly, you go from just IT to taking a look at all your resources under this kind of portfolio model, looking at it from a functional perspective. Hope that answers your question. Yes?
I'll ask the question that the last person I thought was going to ask, and that is, so you're getting your act together within the DHS enterprise. We've heard a lot from Vivek and from the administration about getting the Federal Enterprise Act together. And I'm wondering what implications, your learning at DHS has for how OMB and the federal CIO does its job with respect to the federal enterprise?
Well, I'm certainly not going to be talking for Vivek in this discussion. Let me say, though, that just like we're doing on the data center consolidation initiative, I think for the major, let's say the 24 large agencies, there's so much we can do within those agencies, all right, by ourselves to optimize, like we're trying to do within DHS. I think we want to focus there first. To the degree that we can mature this model and get better, I believe then you can start to look at where are there opportunities beyond. Like the data center consolidation, we asked each of the 24 to come up with their own plans. Now, as we move that forward, we're going to take a look and see if there's some sharing we can do amongst agencies where it makes sense as well, and OMB is going to drive that. But I think that's a model that's more rational, at least in the near term, and then we can look forward to go beyond that as we mature this. Yes?
Richard, to your previous question, within the department, the latest CXO trade emphasis in the government has been CMOs, and some of the things you talked about would naturally fit working closely with that. Can you describe how your department as a CIO is working with the CMO within DHS?
Yeah, we have we don't call them a CMO, but we have an Undersecretary for Management, which is essentially the same thing. And yeah, he's bought into this concept. We're moving out, and you're right. It's not just about the CIO community here. It really is about bringing in the acquisition community, the CFO community, security. I mean, it's all of the above. And HRIT is a great one. I mean, Jeff Neal, who's our CHICO, our Chief Human Capital Officer, and I really partnered to set up this governance board around HRIT. And we're both very excited and pleased with the start we've gotten on that. We're looking to do the same thing. Don Bathurst, who's our Chief Administrative Officer, he's got some of the same issues. And he's talking to me. We're going to set up a similar kind of board looking at all of the administrative things that need to be covered. So, and I think under that kind of CMO concept, if it's done right, it can be very powerful, right? Yes?
Richard, CIOs, CFOs, and the programs are also involved in governance. How do you set it up for nimble and agile governance for mission, stuff out in the front lines, and to really make sure projects can deliver faster services for the mission?
Yeah, well, and good question, Sonny. And I mean, we all, and I think some of the recommendations that certainly we put forward to OMB, we all believe we should be moving to a more agile development paradigm, right? And faster deliveries, smaller deliveries. And I actually think, and I talk again about that program governance that I mentioned in my remarks, that program governance that's close to the program, that's very timely. I mean, if you're going to do agile development, you better quit pretty quick decision making, right? And again, I don't know how you do agile without being able to turn quickly. And I think this program governance model we talk about, and we're also piloting, fits very well into that. I mean, I've run programs, particularly when I was in the private sector. We had these kinds of governance meetings weekly. I mean, because we had real customer deadlines. We were trying to turn releases every 2 to 3 months. I mean, you just don't have time. You've got to make decisions in order to meet those kind of time frames. So I think it scales, right? I mean, now it requires real commitment by senior executives to do these things. But to me, that's what senior executives should be doing. I mean, we want them in forums, working with each other to get the best information so that the best decisions can be made. I didn't emphasize that, but I have found better decision making, okay, when you do it in that collaborative style, where you have that information and you have all the views on the table, better decision making comes out of that than when you do it in a more autocratic style, where one person's making those calls. Okay, I think I can take maybe one more question. Over here.
Could you talk to what kind of challenges you faced as you've rolled out these new governance structures, and what lessons learned you have for other agencies trying to do similar things?
Yeah, I might reflect back on the IRS. First, I'm not going to say it's easy, because it involves some cultural shift typically for government agencies. It's not too different than what Mr. Tapscott was alluding to. The world's changing, right? And the old command and control kind of management structures are really falling away in many places to a more collaborative, whether it's aided by social media or not, but a more collaborative decision-making style that I'm advocating here through this governance. Getting people to believe that, you have to show it to them. And that's, I go back to doing pilots, starting off slow, and then building from there. Okay, but examples, we have a couple other examples in DHS that are a little harder for me to speak to, but the one around HRIT, I think already has shown, people are going, wow, this is different. And all those arguments and all those issues we had around, at least we're talking. At least we're getting the information together that we didn't have together before. That in of itself, I think, making people stand back and say, wait a minute, maybe there is a better way to hear. And one last point on this, because I think it's really important. When I arrived at DHS and started talking about some of these things, people say, oh, you can't do that at DHS. That won't work. People in CBP will never trust what people at TSA are doing, that kind of stuff. And I really disagree. It's human nature, right? If you can get people to start working together, they will start building personal relationships, irrespective of their organization. They will start to trust each other. They will start to help each other. It happens. But if you don't get them together, that will never happen. All right? Hey, thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks to all of you for your attention. I hope I haven't lost it yet. I think there's a party over on this side of the room. The tracks are going to continue at 1:45 and finish at 4:30. The 2010 SIG State of the Union is at 5 p.m. in Colony ABC. This session will provide an update on the shared interest groups and a proposal to create an innovation institute within ACT-IAC. Immediately after that session, the reception begins at 6 p.m. on the Virginia lawn. Dinner is at 7 p.m. In addition to a very fine meal and very special entertainment performance, we will graduate the 2010 Partners class and present the ELC 2010 awards, including the Janice Mendenhall Award. After dinner, we will relax with dessert and fabulous dance music from the fabulous Dial Tones. Enjoy the afternoon, and we'll see you at the reception. Thanks.